All right, we are in chapter 7. Obviously, I love all the chapters. Another one that I love is this one. Why? Because it really hones us into how we might use language to manipulate or be direct or indirect or however it is. Chapter 7 is more on an indirect kind of thing. But real quick, we're going to go over kind of how we understand language, how we use it, and why this is important. First and foremost, why is language powerful? Because we use it to express our feelings. We use it to ask for the things that we want. We use it for arguing and convincing, which is a lot of what chapter 7 is about. And then sometimes, or oftentimes, we use it to explain or to clarify so that people understand what it is we are trying to say. How are we trained to use language? We use language to maybe ask questions or not, right? Some questions are considered rude. What do you talk about at the dinner table? What do you not, right? When it's Thanksgiving, politics and money is never the thing. Okay, we also use it for learning how to apologize or maybe to say thank you, to be courteous, maybe through certain rituals, may I present, right? That's just kind of how we are as humans. It's in the way in which we communicate. Sometimes in doing something like through which rituals, it then creates a certain atmosphere, and that's the point of the language, right? We use it often for good grammar, and then sometimes we use it to be indirect because we don't want to say the thing. We'll go into that in a little bit when we talk about some of our vocabulary words. All right. Let's talk about how we are lazy when we use language. Oftentimes we'll use cliches like I work like a dog. I work like a dog, right? Do dogs work? I know my cat doesn't. Anyway, all right, so slang, things like freaked out, or hyperbole, things like that where you use like, I literally, well, you might not have, I literally died. Well, you didn't literally die. You're still here to tell the story. So maybe opting out of a conversation. We're not quite sure what to say, so we're just like, whatever. Okay. Most people speak in cliches or spend very little time communicating honestly. And that could be we're in a fast society, or maybe we're not quite sure how to say it, or maybe the cliche works for the situation, right? So that's just kind of how it is. And then very oftentimes, college is the last time you think analytically. If you're thinking analytically in college, it depends, right? I know that I actually do it, that's what I have to do every day for my job. But even then, that becomes repetitive, correct? Okay, denotation versus connotation, okay? I'm going to give you the definitions, and then we're going to understand kind of more of like the feeling versus the actual meaning of the word. So denotation is the specific object or action that the word points to, refers to, or indicates. Denotation is the actual meaning of the term. Connotation is the feeling of the word. Connotation is where all the images, positive, negative, or neutral, that are associated with any given denotation by an individual or group, right? So here's the word. This is the denotation is what it means. The connotation is how I feel about the word, okay? Both concrete and abstract words have connotations that are different for different individuals, right? So while we might have a very specific meaning to the word, the connotation, how we feel towards the word, is based on individuals, okay? All right, connotation and denotation. Again, what a word means versus how it feels. This is very important, why we're very cognizant of the terms that we use. So connotation versus denotation, using the words fat, chunky, or obese, right? Especially when you go to the doctor and they're using certain terms. More often than not, if they're going to talk about your weight, they're going to say something like obese versus fat or chunky, right? There's just a level of quote unquote, I don't know if that's even respect, but like when they have the conversation, how are they using it, right? Because many people take the connotation of some of these terms to heart, which is understandable and respectable, If we talk about maybe a house, a mansion, a shack, an apartment, what's the difference, right? A home versus a house. Each one has its own connotation versus denotation. Dog, canine, beast, puppy. All dogs are puppies. Personal opinion on that one, okay? So anyway, each one of you, every time I said one of those words, you had a different feeling towards it. Your feeling towards it might be different than my feeling towards it, okay? People use different connotations consciously. So oftentimes we will use, like I'll say puppy because it has a certain connotation for me versus canine, right? There's these two different feelings. There's oftentimes where there's the unconscious use, which can tell you how you feel towards something. And again, the same word can mean different things for different people. If we talk about like Thanksgiving, some people have a feeling towards it versus other people who have a feeling towards it, right? So some people might feel nostalgic towards it, and then some people might have that feeling of, colonialism towards it, right? And that's totally okay. Everyone has their own right to feel as they feel towards something, okay? Just based on your experience, maybe your culture, maybe your family, maybe your experience, okay? Same thing with words like they changed the Washington Redskins name because obviously that's wildly racist. And some people have a connotation to that. Some people are like, well, I love that because that's my team. And other people are like, well, just so you know, it's wildly inappropriate. So for them, it's a matter of, what one means or what the actual denotation is. So anyway, just consider that as we move forward. And some people have certain reasons why words might, I guess, make them feel a certain way. Anyway, I don't even want to get into that. It's too much going on right now. But anyway, all right, it's all about based on the context in which you're using it, right? If you're talking to a female and you say, hey lady, hey woman, hey girl, hey chick, right? Each one has its own connotation. Even though the denotation is the same thing, we're referencing a female, some of those terms like, look at that chick, versus look at that woman, look at that lady, right? Each one of them kind of has its own feel. Some of them are more disrespectful than others. Again, it all depends on how we are interacting with people. So just be mindful of that. The way in which people will do that is a lot of times this happens in advertising. And I say this because advertising assignment is coming up. Think about things when we say, oh, it's low fat, it's organic, it's 1%, there's calcium added, there's, it's hormone free. These are things that are hoping to get you to go, oh, okay, and then purchase it. That's the goal. Whether or not that matters to you, whether that's, that's just how it is. Let's see here. All sorts of words have different applications and feelings and things to them. And so be mindful of when you're having that reaction to a word, ask yourself, why is that? What's my reaction to that? When we talk about, maybe the immigration debate on people being either undocumented workers, illegal aliens, immigrants, asylum seekers, right? Each one of these has a physical reaction for some people. And so you have to ask yourself, oh, that's weird. I wonder why I'm having this physical reaction to this statement, right? It's your connotation towards a term. Okay. Let's go into language being very important again. Reification. So reification, and please don't try and Google this, let's use it from the book and how we're using it in class. Reification is the process by which words become more powerful than the actual, let me rephrase that. A process by which words become more powerful and real than objective reality. Meaning, let me give you examples. I always get stuck on this one because it's hard to explain in the definition, but I can explain it more with examples. So an example would be, if I were to say Pop-Tarts versus toaster pastries, there's a difference, right? But they're very similar. So if I say to you, I'm like, hey, let's go get some Pop-Tarts. And then I get these things that are called toaster pastries that are nothing like Pop-Tarts. Like, that's not the same thing. It's a reification. Anything that we think as a pastry that goes into the, the little toaster maker, we go, oh, that's not a Pop-Tart. It's a toaster pastry, right? So oftentimes we'll use terms to re-identify what something is, reification. So that's probably not the best example. Let's go and talk about dumpsters. So a dumpster is the name, right? Like Saran wrap. Those are the names of the product. That's the, what do you call it? How do I say this? When I say dumpster, I'm not talking about the actual dumpster that's outside there. I'm actually talking about the logo, the trademarked name of what that, garbage container is. Kind of like Saran wrap is plastic wrap. Not all plastic wrap is Saran wrap, but all Saran wrap is plastic wrap. I hope that makes more sense, right? So Saran wrap, it's not the plastic part. It's the name of a brand that creates or that makes that plastic cover. I hope that makes sense to you. Let's think of another one. When we think of Band-Aids, people will just throw, oh, give me some Band-Aids. Well, Band-Aids is the brand, but not always considered, like, not all products that are bandages are Band-Aids. Does that make sense? Right? Because Band-Aids is the brand, but not necessarily always the product. Okay, think about Jello. Jello's another one. Gelatin. Not all gelatin is Jello, but all Jello is gelatin, unless it's Jello pudding. Anyway, so the reason why I say this is oftentimes I'll be like, oh, get me a Band-Aid, and someone gets a bandage, but not that bandage doesn't mean it's going to be the Band-Aid brand. Okay. So that's reification. Like when we talk about, oh, can you go get me a Coke, or a soda pop, right? The difference is, you say, go get me a Coke, and you bring back Shasta, right? There's a difference because like, well, I didn't want that. I wanted a Coke, not a Shasta. Okay. So anyway, if that makes any sense, reification is just using the brand name for all things, right? That's pretty much what the shortest version of what that is. Also, we can think of reification and how we might rename something so it seems more appealing. When we think of escargot, right? Oh, I'd like to get some escargot. In reality, it's snails. Caviar, fish eggs, right? Like we reificate things so that it has a different connotation to it. See how I use those words together? Okay. We talk about either goose liver or pate. Pate is goose liver, but if I offered you goose liver, you'd be like, oh, but I said, would you like some pate? And you're like, oh, so fancy. Why don't I? Let's see here. Sneakers or Jordans, right? Sometimes name brands we are more willing to purchase versus just something that's not name brand. That's how they get you. A watch versus a Rolex, which by the way, I just learned Rolexes are up to like $30,000 for like a Rolex and Plus. I'm like, for a watch? That's wild. I obviously do not understand the concept of price when it comes to watches. Anyway, okay. Some words can be more weighted than others. If I say I'm going, are you going to give your kid a slap or a swat, right? I don't know, spanking or a beating. And these are very violent terms, but I'm trying to express like your connotation towards those feelings, right? The words are weighted, right? When you talk about something, which term are you using? Because it does matter, okay? Am I a professor or am I an instructor, right? Do I have a doctorate or a master's? That makes a difference in how you would address me. Okay, advertisers know this, and so do politicians, and their whole goal is to reuse these words to make you feel a certain way, okay? Because words are weighted, like make America great again. The irony of that is, what does that even mean? To each person, they have their own feeling towards what that looks like. Make America great again. But then the question has to be, for who? Like, what is it? What are you referring to in what way? Also recognize that oftentimes the person who says it has more weight to it. Okay, so if I say it versus your uncle, right? Does it matter that I have a 2 master's degrees versus your uncle who says he's never graduated high school, right? Does it matter who, and we call that appeal to authority because I said it, does have more weight versus your uncle, Let's see. Again, like we say oftentimes, like I say oftentimes, I don't know who says this. This was, maybe this changes over time, but like, if the president says it, it's right. If a policeman says it, it's right. If a professor or a scientist says it's right, right? Are we listening to the title or are we listening to the information that's being given? And can we say that, oh, I'm trusting them because of their title versus recognizing what they're saying might not be true? That's appeal to authority. Just keep that in mind. We've already talked about that. Okay. All right, one thing we need to differentiate is the word from the thing. Okay, if I'm yelling fire in a crowded theater and there's no fire, what's wrong with that? Well, obviously it creates panic. People are running out. People get hurt. This is not good. That's why we don't do that. Same thing with why you don't make jokes or bomb threats at airports. A lot of it is it's what the words and the actions create. So we really have to be mindful in the way in which we communicate and talk about things because there is harm in language. There's a lot of harm in language. And we might say, oh, freedom of speech. But at some point we have to recognize like, oh, there's a lot of harm in some of those things. Okay. So it's just really important that we understand that, again, words are powerful and they are weighted and they really do have an effect on others. And a lot of times lives are at stake when we think about this, okay? Let's see here. I'm gonna move down a little bit. Okay, just as we had talked about before, not all words need to be a conflict. Not all things have to be weighted. Oftentimes they can have really cool, I don't know how you would say it, Power. They can have really good power in a positive way. Like the French don't have a word for the weekend, so they use the English version, right? Déjà vu, things like that. That there's might not be a word, a je ne sais quoi. When people say je ne sais quoi, it's actually literally saying, wow, there's no real word for it, right? Je ne sais quoi. Okay, I don't know what. I don't know how to say what it is. Okay. We also think about things that we create. We always like to create as humans new words, things like bromance, friend zone, things like that. One of my favorite books is Made in America, and it shows you how we've developed language over time. Whatever, you can check that out in the notes. Isn't it true that sometimes we get the meaning wrong? Absolutely. Here we go. We're going to go into vocabulary words. Terms like vagueness, ambiguity, doublespeak, and weasel words are all ways in which we try and manipulate conversations because we don't want people to really understand exactly what we're saying. Vagueness, which is unclear, too abstract, and too unspecific. It's not really saying what you mean to say. Politicians do this all the time. I'll do what I can to help those who most need it in our society. The hell, who's that? For who? What does that even mean? Tell me more. I need more specifics. That's why they use vagueness, because they can get away with it and make it feel like, oh, that's me. You're talking about me. They're not talking about anybody, really. That's the point of the vagueness. Sometimes doctors will do it too, where they maybe don't want to tell you, hey, you're dying. They'll say, can we find ways to make you more comfortable? Okay. Or when you are breaking up with someone, sometimes they'll say, it's not you, it's me. Sometimes it is this person, but sometimes it's also you, right? Because I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Or like Allstate, you're in good hands. What does that mean? What do you mean when you are saying that? Okay. What they're trying to do is make a promise of a thing that sounds good, but not about anything specific. They're not really telling you anything. So ambiguity, it differs from vagueness, okay? So don't use them as synonyms. So if you're using vagueness, don't use it as you would ambiguity. They're two totally different things. Page 293 is going to give you the best on that. So ambiguity would be like, give Mark a hand. Well, are we giving Mark a hand, or are we giving Mark a hand by helping him, right? So that's ambiguity. We're like, it could be either or. Oftentimes that's intended. Sometimes it's because someone didn't think to, either explain themselves a little bit better, or maybe they didn't have another way of saying that. So we could think about oversight, right? Or buckle. Buckle has those two meanings, like, oh, he just buckled, or he buckled his pants, right? Like, kind of depends on how you are using it. So if you go to 293, you're going to see the ambiguity in language. That's totally different than vagueness. So please take a look at that. Some examples are when they're looking at different headlines, and this happens very often. I'm sure you see the memes. Drought turns coyotes into watermelons. Droughts turns coyotes into watermelons. I'm sorry, coyotes to watermelons. That was my bad on that term. Coyotes to watermelons. So in other words, what they're saying is the coyotes don't turn into watermelons. They go to watermelons to get more water. Okay, if that makes sense. Need plainclothes security, must have shoplifting experience. Okay. Plainclothes security must have shoplifting experience. Are they saying shoplifting experience because they shoplifted, or they were helping to stop shoplifting, right? So anyway, please check out 293. I don't need to go over the book. You got it in front of you. You can read it. Use those as excellent examples to help you understand the difference between vagueness and ambiguity. Doublespeak. Okay, it includes euphemism, spin, jargon, gobbledygook, weasel words, all these sorts of things. So when we think of doublespeak, it's the difference between, imagine the difference between if I were to say a quiz, an exam, or a test. Each one of those, while doing very similar things, has different meaning, right? So by choosing one or the other, I am consciously manipulating my students' attitudes towards what they're doing. That's what I have to do sometimes. Because if I say an exam, if you're like me, my tummy hurts. I'm like, oh, dude, I can't do an exam. But if you say a quiz, I'm like, oh, I like quizzes. Those are fun. I do those on, social media all the time, right? So just recognize that's how we do doublespeak. It's the same thing, but we say different words in order to create a different connotation. Okay. Again, I don't do quick writes. I do like responses or interactions. Like oftentimes I ask you all if you could do, interact with your peers versus respond. Interactions, I get better responses from you versus just responses. A lot of times the responses are like, this is great, while interactions are like actually interacting with one another, which is the point of a peer response. So anyway, that's the importance of double speak. Okay. All right. So while the listed items are harmless, double speak is mostly harmful, right? Because it is me manipulating in order for me to get what I need, right? It has the connotation of lying. Okay, so I recognize that. I do know that. It is also, unfortunately, to your best interest so that you can do, more things with what you're doing here in class. Okay, euphemism is the words we say when we don't want to say the real thing. Okay, it's similar to some of the others, but euphemism is more delicate. Like when you say, I'm going to go powder my nose, right? When you go to use the restroom. It's saying one thing but meaning another. Okay. Oftentimes people will use it to soften the blow of something. When we talk about maybe somebody's package versus their penis, right? Like you had two different connotations when I said those two words, right? The point is euphemisms oftentimes soften a thing and try and be polite and respectful. I know that was like a weird example, but the point is that feeling you got when I said those two words, even though they're the same thing. Okay, so euphemism. Euphemisms for like dying or going to the bathroom or having sex, right? Each one of those we have a euphemism for, right? Is that a euphemism for that? So when you hear that, what they're saying is a softer way of saying something. Like, again, if we were to say die, oh, he passed on, right? Or he's gone to a better place, okay? Or to go to the bathroom, it's like, again, like I said, I powdered my nose, or I have to go pee-pees, or right. So sometimes we say things a little bit softer than what we really mean to say. We might use this when we talk about used cars. We might talk about this when someone gets fired, and so on and so forth, right? How are we using a euphemism to say what we really mean to say? Spin, it's another form of doublespeak, but this is you're turning the words around to mean, to have a more positive or negative connotation, right? I'm going to use that word a lot in this lecture. So spin doctors, publicists reframe people's actions or words to make them seem more positive or more negative. And you see this all the time, especially during election season. Things get spun around, or if there's a famous person who is either doing something good or something bad, oftentimes people will spin what really happened and take things out of context in order to get you to feel a certain way. Spin uses fallacies and deflection, right? When you're using a spin, you're turning things around and be like, oh, but that's not what I said. That's not what I meant to do, right? Turning things around in order to get what they want. I didn't say that. You get that often, trying to spin it. Well, that's not what I said. You took that out of context. Sometimes it does happen. Very often people do take things out of context, but at the same time, sometimes that doesn't happen that way. Okay, so think about that. Spin takes sound bites out of context and turns them into something negative. Again, you're going to see that very often during election seasons, or whenever someone is trying to make somebody else look bad. That happens very, very often, especially on the internet. So I know news people will do that. Social commentary, it happens often. So just be mindful when you hear something and have a physical, emotional response to it. Pause and go, I should look into that and see where it really came from. Okay. Jargon takes the terms that are specialized and excludes people with them, or makes the average person feel inadequate to judge. Oftentimes, as an instructor, we might be using certain words like, humanizing classes, or there's so many others. I'm blanking right now, but I would use bigger words and jargon like pedagogy or scaffolding or things like that. That as an instructor, of course, I know what that means. But if I'm having a conversation with somebody who is not in the academic realm, they're just like, what? All right. And sometimes people do it on purpose, and sometimes people do it just because that's an easier way of having communication. All kind of depends, especially doctors, lawyers, football players. That kind of thing. Oftentimes someone might say, why don't you just say it simply? It's like, well, because that's our language, our jargon, the way in which we communicate, because it's a part of our niche little thing that is specific to us. Okay. Sometimes it's fine. Most people, like, oh, okay, I kind of get the idea of what you're trying to say. Or sometimes, it's put in place to confuse you. Okay, so think about that. Oftentimes, terms and conditions of credit cards do that. They use this a lot of jargon, especially financial jargon. Just to kind of, I don't know if it's intended to confuse you, but it's just what they use so that they can go back and reference it in, times of being sued or whatever. Okay, so just be mindful of the use of jargon. Gobbledygook is so complicated. You got to go to $2.99. $2.99 has the best version of gobbledygook that I would definitely say works the best. The example is, I'm going to give you an example of gobbledygook on 99. Some people get the notion that the purpose of Erhard Seminars training is to make you better. It is not. I happen to think that you are perfect exactly the way you are. The problem is that people get stuck acting the way they were instead of being the way they are. What? Okay. The purpose of establishing EST training is to transform your ability to experience living so that the situations you've been trying to change or have been putting up with clear up just in the process of living. What? That's exactly what gobbledygook does. It's kind of crazy talk. I don't know if any of you have ever gotten those sheets on your car that go into blah, blah, it's this gobbledygook, saying a bunch of things that almost make no sense at all. The words you understand, but the combination makes no sense. It's so complicated, full of extra clauses, vague language, catchphrases, allusions, that the listener lose track of, if ever you could have kept track of, which you're never supposed to keep track of what is being said, right? It's meant to be it's meant to be confusing. That's the whole point of gobbledygook, right? To make you go, oh yeah, you're right, even though you're like, I don't really have any idea what you're saying. Okay, again, please see page 299. All right, last few ones. Weasel words that advertisers use to hedge their points and make vague claims that they don't have to prove. You're in good hands with Allstate. What the heck? We don't even understand what that means. So this cream will help prevent acne. What does help mean, right? So it is indefinable. We're not able to define what it means to say help. All right, how are you helping? Okay, it doesn't give specifics. That's a weasel word, kind of move it around. Spick and span is like a tornado in a bottle. The word used it like. They use the word like. It's like a tornado in a bottle. How? I don't understand that. Weasel words, okay? All right, last but not least, romancing the product. Okay, when words are used to help customers associate the product with the things that are bigger, better, and more exciting. On pages 301 and 302, I'm going to run there real quick just to make it easier on you. I really hope you're using the readings. The book is really important. I know it's hard, especially if you're using the PDF version. All right, so think about virtual versus virtually. The words mean almost, but not in fact. So again, I'm looking on page 31, and we're talking about words that are romancing the product. Virtually foolproof, okay? Virtually never needs service. Virtually trouble-free. Okay, so it's almost, but not quite. That's the idea of using the word virtually, okay? Like when they use the word acts or works, okay? Works like magic, or works to help prevent blah blah, or acts against such and such, or acts on the cough control center, right? Like, what does that even mean? Again, we're using romancing these products here. Anyway, so take a look at 301 and 302. It gives you a really good example of what these terms mean. Let me see, 302. Did I screw that one up? Nope, I think we're good. I'm trying to fly through this for y'all. Nope, we're good. Anyway, so go ahead and take a look at all this in the reading. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes I run through these so fast that I'm like, oh, of course, that's what I mean. Anyway, romancing the product. All right, so these are things you're going to be using in your advertising assignment. So make sure that you feel comfortable with these terms. Make sure you reach out to me if you have questions. And you all have a fantastic afternoon.